You have just found the only resource you need for the TOEFL speaking. This is a complete TOEFL speaking course where you're going to master all 4 TOEFL speaking tasks. Now, this is important because your goal is to get the highest possible score on test day. And after teaching thousands of students for nearly 10 years now, I know exactly what you need to do to get the highest possible score. My name is Josh from TST Prep, and in this video, you're going to learn secret strategies for answering speaking tasks 1 through 4, practice questions and sample answers to learn from, tips to improve your pronunciation, your fluency, and just your overall speaking score, and templates to organize your answers quickly and easily. No fluff, just the exact tips, tricks, and strategies you need to get the highest possible score on test day. Take your time, feel free to pause the video, replay parts that you don't understand, take notes, but let's get into it right now. TOEFL Speaking. Welcome to this complete guide to TOEFL Speaking Question 1. Now what I want to do first is actually jump way ahead and give you a template for TOEFL Speaking Question 1. And the reason is because a lot of people just want a template. They're like, just tell me what to do with a template and then I'll move on. So here it is. Here's your template. But we're actually going to do a lot together in this guide to TOEFL Speaking Question 1 because there's a lot to know. But before I go into it, one thing to keep in mind is that the most important thing is for you to sound natural and conversational. For you to sound like you're speaking to a friend pretty much. You're going to hear a lot of advice, a lot of tips and tricks, a lot of strategies, and you probably will get a bit confused because there's so many things to keep in mind. But really, take a couple things from this lecture that you think are helpful and use it to sound natural and conversational. That's my goal, is for you at the end of this to know how to score well and how to sound comfortable scoring well on test day. So a quick overview of all the things we're going to do is that you're going to know what the question will look like, question number 1. You're going to know how to give a high scoring response. You're going to know how to use a template and other important vocabulary. And you're going to know how to grade your own speaking. This is for any TOEFL taker. If you're brand new to the TOEFL or if you know a bit about it already, you will hear new things here. You can also download the TOEFL Speaking 26 guide. I will put a link in the description. All of this information is laid out in the guide, and this is all updated for the newer version of the TOEFL test. All right, so got that out of the way. Let's start talking about the question. So there are 4 question types in the TOEFL speaking, and question 1, what we're going to talk about, is the independent speaking. They ask about your opinion, you have 15 seconds to prepare, and 45 seconds to speak. It's pretty simple. So why this very long video? Well, there's just a lot of things that could come up on test day, and you want to make sure you know exactly what to expect because that will give you extra confidence. So there are a couple different types of questions. There's agree, disagree, personal preference, or imaginary situation. And all these are pretty much the same. They ask about your opinion. This is what the question will look like on test day. This is from ETS, the company that makes the TOEFL. It's, there's a question in the middle, you'll see a timer up on the top, and that's about it. Here's an example question. Do you agree or disagree? All high school students should wear school uniforms. So just asking you if you agree or disagree. Asking you what you prefer. Some people prefer to get up early, others prefer to get up later. Which do you prefer? So it could be something like that. And imagine a situation. You have to give your friend some bad news. Would you do it in a quiet, private space or a loud public space? So most of this is kind of like about your life, about your education, about your family, about your culture, and about your personal preferences. So something that you can relate to usually. So why do some people struggle with this question? Why am I making a very long video about a question that you only have to speak for 45 seconds? Well, it's because that the question is actually pretty tough. It's hard to speak for 45 seconds. If I ask you, should students wear school uniforms? You'll say, yeah, sure, they should. And I say, okay, why? And you're like, oh, well, because they don't judge each other much if they have a uniform. Okay? That takes like 10 seconds. And then you think, oh, I had to speak for 45 seconds. Oh, wait, but I can't speak for 2 minutes. I can't speak for 1 minute. I can't speak for 10 seconds. I have to speak for exactly 45 seconds? wow, that's pretty tough. So that's where a lot of the strategy comes in, is that it's hard to speak for this very specific amount of time. So let's go through a question, and I will give an example and show you some templates, and I want to give you a lot of ideas to help you answer this question well. So we're going to look at the first one. Do you agree or disagree all high school students should wear school uniforms? In my experience, most of the question, not most, but I'd say about 50% of the time it's agree or disagree. So the first step is to start your response strong. Be sure to know exactly what you want to say in the beginning. One thing that is really uncomfortable on test day is that it's timed. We're just not used to this when you speak. If I say 3, 2, 1, go, and then you have to start to speak, probably you'll be nervous, probably you'll have some hesitation, probably like, okay, and then you'll start to speak. We really want to try to reduce that. Try to say 3, 2, 1, speak, and then you're ready to go. So the first step for all of these speaking questions is to have a really strong introduction and to know how to start. That's going to be the most helpful for you. So these are all different ways you could start. These are all fine. You could use them for pretty much any question. I definitely think that. Personally, I strongly believe that. Personally speaking, I feel that. Okay, so any of these are okay. Now, I want to explain a little bit about why I put this type of introduction. So first of all, you'll notice that I put words like definitely, I definitely think that, or I strongly believe that. Adding adverbs and adjectives, not a ton, but a few in your response actually helps your score. So if you do some experiments with the TOEFL speech rater, you'll notice that if you put some of these adverbs and some of these phrases, it actually helps your score. So instead of just saying, I think that, saying, I strongly think that. Instead of saying, believe, I strongly believe that. You could also make the words a bit trickier too. So for example, instead of saying to me or for me, I say, personally speaking. That's harder to say. It's a phrase that comes together. Personally speaking, personally speaking. I've never thought about this before, I have never thought about this before. This is a whole phrase that has to come together. Each word has to be in the right place. When you use phrases, it helps your score because phrases are harder to use. That doesn't mean you should do it all the time and you don't want to go phrase crazy on test day, but a couple of these will help. To be honest, this is a phrase. I don't say honestly, say to be honest. You could say honestly too, but to be honest, to be honest. You have to bring these things together. I have to say that, have to bring this together. These are words that have to come together. These are phrases, adverbs, adjectives, have a positive impact on your score. Personally speaking, I definitely think that all high school students should wear school uniforms because people will judge each other on their character rather than their clothing. So we're going to look at this question about uniforms, and that's my introduction. I say, personally speaking, I definitely think that. And then you'll also notice that I did a couple other things. So I restated the question, which was all high school students. I gave my opinion that I think they should wear school uniforms, and I gave a reason for my opinion. That's the part highlighted in red. Because people will judge each other on their character rather than their clothing. So you want to, when you start, you want to restate the question, give your opinion, and a reason for your opinion. And that's what I did in one sentence. So it shouldn't take too long, right there. So when you're introducing the reason, I put because here. So just to go back, I said because people will judge each other. You could separate this into two sentences. You could say, personally speaking, I definitely think that all high school students should wear school uniforms. Period. New sentence. The first reason is people will judge each other on their character. Or firstly, people will judge each other based on their character. So you could separate this into two sentences if you want. And here are some phrases that you can use. All right. So hopefully you're still with me and that you kind of understand what I'm talking about. I'm going to give some more templates and some more phrases for you to use on test day. And this will help you get a better structure score too. So that's part of your grade is structure. So that's why we're doing this. And again, it's hard to speak for 45 seconds. I gave my opinion. I gave a reason for my opinion. How long was that? That was like 10 seconds. what on earth are you going to say for the whole 45 seconds, right? So we have to keep going. First thing you want to do, or after you do that, you want to give an example. Some people struggle with giving an example, and I'm going to show you how to give a response without an example later. I'll talk about that later. But you give a personal example connected to your reason. So after my introduction, I say, I remember when I was in elementary school, we had the freedom to choose our own clothing. I always wore sweatpants because they're really comfortable, while almost everyone else in school wore jeans. Other kids in the class made fun of my attire daily. So there's my little story. I wore sweatpants. I didn't have uniforms. Everyone made fun of me, called me sweatpants boy. Good times. And so that is my example, and my example supports my opinion. So my opinion is that they should wear uniforms. And I remember when I was a kid in elementary school, I didn't have a uniform. Okay. So yeah, that's my example. And you can introduce it with these phrases. I remember when, or for example, I will never forget when, I once heard about, more specifically, any of these you can use to introduce your reason or your example. And there's my example again, right there. Okay, so we're moving along. This is about 25 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that. So I still have about 15, 20 seconds left. Now, what if I can't think of a personal example? Is there another way to answer TOEFL speaking question number 1? There is, and I will get to that towards the end. So if you stick around towards the end, I'll talk about that. But just for now, let's focus on giving a personal example. After that, you want to state your second reason. On top of that, uniforms bring people closer together. So a lot of times when you say one reason, you feel like you don't have enough time. So if you feel like giving one reason and one example, you don't have enough time, okay, here's one more reason and one more example. So you can also say in addition, or moreover, or additionally, or furthermore. Any of these are okay. One thing to keep in mind is that one of the reasons why I give you so many of these transitions to use, and I want you to decide which to use, is because some of these phrases will be more comfortable for you than others. So for example, when I use furthermore, furthermore has an FR sound, fur, and it also has a TH for thir, and an ER again for there, and another R, more. That's a really hard word to say for a lot of people. There are a lot of R's in that sound. So if I give you a template that used furthermore, and you tried to copy it, but you really have trouble saying furthermore, like you just can't say it, it's really hard, don't use that word. Use one of these other words, one of these other phrases. Okay, so use a word or phrase that you feel comfortable using. Try to avoid sounds that you have trouble using. It'll help you on test day. It'll help your score. I have that. My second reason, on top of that, uniforms bring people closer together. The last sentence here. But I still got about 15 seconds left. I need more. So I'm going to give another example. And I say, for example, I live in Japan now, and high school students are required to wear school uniforms. It's easy for them to spot their friends on the train and look out for each other on the street in case of danger. This would not be possible if they wore plain clothes and blended in with the rest of the population. All right, so I got my second example. Got a pretty long response here. This looks pretty good. It's probably about 40 seconds. I might need an extra couple seconds. You can restate your opinion or restate the question, okay? So let's see here. You can say in conclusion, or so to sum up. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I didn't mention this. The reason why it's red here with the conclusion and a star is because it's optional. You don't have to put a conclusion. It's not really necessary because you're going to repeat. Like, so if I gave a conclusion here, it would be something like, as you can see, I think it's a good idea for students to wear school uniforms. So I already said school uniforms. I already said students. I already said a lot of this already, this vocabulary. So by repeating that, it's not really going to help my vocabulary score or my grammar score that much. You want to think of your conclusion as like an extra 5 seconds in your pocket. If you have like 5 seconds left, you can use it and it's fine. But if you don't get to say it, no big deal. Don't worry about it. Not necessary. All right. So here are some different conclusion transitions. In conclusion, so to sum up, as you can see, so that's why, or to make a long story short. All right. Now, I wanted to put everything on one page. You can take a picture of this or screenshot. This is a template. It has the time, has what you do for each part, and the template. I'm not going to talk about this too much because I just talked about all this already, but you can take a picture of this if you want on one page. It's also in the 26 guide that you can download in the description. So yeah, here's an example template. You know, if you're just like, Josh, just tell me a template, tell me what to say, I don't care, I don't know what to do, you can just copy this one. Personally, I strongly believe that. I remember when, on top of that, for example, as you can see, just use this one if you don't want to pick the one that you want. If you find the time too short, you can give just one reason and one long personal example. So sometimes people feel like 45 seconds is a lot of time and they need 2 reasons and 2 examples, but 1 reason and 1 example is totally fine. So here's an example of the same response, except I gave a longer example. I say, I remember when I was in elementary school, we had the freedom to choose our own clothing, and then I talk about that experience. I also include a conclusion sentence. As you can see, from my experience in grammar school, it would have been much better if we had been forced to wear uniforms. So I had a chance to put a conclusion here. So it's up to you. 2 reasons, 2 examples, 1 reason, 1 example, that's fine. Either one's okay. I just want to show you that you can do either one. Let me give a shout out. So this is my promo time, the TOEFL emergency course. So this is a premium course. So what this means is that if you have 2 days to prepare, 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, we have a study plan designed for any timeline that you have within a month or 2. If you have more than 2 months to study, then I don't think this is a good fit. You need something different. But this is perfect for anybody who has about a month or less to prepare, has a bunch of practice tests, I believe 6 or 7 practice tests. I think it's 6 practice tests. You get a course with everything that you need. The course is about 6-7 hours of videos, extra practice, and this offer is only for the YouTube audience. So this is only for YouTube. If you go down in the description, you'll find a link to this emergency course for $67 instead of the regular $97. And this is only for you guys watching this. Check this out, the TOEFL Emergency Course Premium. Let's talk about taking notes. So we're going to take a step back. At first, I wanted to show you the template, show you an example so you kind of know what to do. Now that you know what to do, it'll be a little bit easier for you to take notes. You'll know what notes you should take. Now you might be thinking, hey man, I only have 15 seconds to prepare. I mean, what notes should I take? So on test day, you have a pencil and a piece of paper. You're right, you only have 15 seconds. It's not a lot of time at all. You don't have to take notes if you don't want to, but you just write down a couple words. Remember the structure, your opinion, first reason, example, second reason, example. So this is what my notes looked like. I'm going to write about grammar school, and I wore sweatpants. And as you can see, I didn't write grammar school. I didn't write sweatpants. I wrote GRMR in school, and I tried to make sweatpants shorter. Instead of Japan, I wrote JPN, and I wrote high school students on train. This took like 10 seconds to write. Now, you don't have to do this, and your notes, you're not going to read your notes when you're speaking. It's just like, I usually just put 1 or 2 or 3 words, and the words help trigger my memory, especially for the second reason. Like, because the first reason it's kind of on the top of my head, but in the middle I might get a little confused, I might forget what I'm talking about, and then I look at my paper and I say, oh, Japan, right, okay, so in Japan, and then I can speak. So that's how it can help you. Practice, test this, see if you like it. You know, you don't have to take notes. It's just a kind of piece of advice for you if you want. You just want to write down a couple words that will help trigger your memory while you speak. You don't read your notes, so the notes are not for reading. Just a couple words to help trigger your memory. So let me just talk a little bit about self-grading really quickly. There are websites that you can use. There are 2 in particular that I find very helpful. One is My Speaking Score. This is the best one. They use SpeechRater. This is the same tool, the same software that's used to grade your TOEFL speaking. So this will give you a really good idea of what your TOEFL speaking score will be on test day. The other site that you can use is ELSA Speech Analyzer. I really like this site. There's a lot you can do for free. The grade you'll get is a good idea of your TOEFL score. It's not the TOEFL, it's not the same score. They don't use the same grading criteria, but it'll give you a lot of good feedback on your speaking. You have things like word count and speaking speed and pronunciation, and a lot of it's free. So check that out, Elsa Speech Analyzer. I highly recommend this site. And yeah, but if you look at the speaking grading rubrics from TOEFL, from ETS, it's not so helpful. It's not really going to give you a lot of information on how to grade your speaking, which is why I put a checklist in the speaking guide. So check out the speaking guide in the description. This is the list of questions you can ask yourself. I'm not going to go through all these, but you can download the guide and you can do this on your own, and you can use this checklist to help you grade your own speaking. So you record your voice, everybody's favorite thing to do. You listen to your voice, even more exciting. I know you hate it. But you listen to your voice and then you answer these questions, and it'll help you judge your strengths and weaknesses. So there's those two websites, one's free, one's paid, and then the other one is this checklist that you can do as well to grade your own speaking. As I mentioned before, a bonus template. Let me give this to you now. If you don't know how to give a personal example, you feel like, Josh, I just can't do this, I don't know personal examples. Okay, let me show you how to give a response without a personal example. So what you do is you talk about two different perspectives, on one hand and on the other hand. So it says, to be honest, I have mixed feelings about this question. So that's the template, mixed feelings. So I feel both ways. On the one hand, school uniforms can have a positive impact on the student body. When everyone wears the same clothes, they're more likely to feel like part of a family. On top of that, so adding to this, they will be less likely to judge each other based on appearance alone. On the other hand, so then I talk about the opposite side. So the reason why we do it this way is because if you just say like, I think students should wear uniforms, the first reason is this, the second reason is this, it's going to sound a lot like a list. And it's not going to have a lot of different grammar, a lot of different vocabulary. You're going to be repeating the same things over and over again. That's why I recommend a personal example. But a way kind of around this is if you talk about both sides of the issue. And so that's why we do this here. And then on the other hand, when schools force kids to wear uniforms, so you can do it this way as well. And then the conclusion, so to sum up. So that's another way to answer question 1. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to this complete guide to TOEFL Speaking Question 2. Now, I'm going to start like I usually do and jump way ahead and actually just give you a template for TOEFL Speaking Question 2, because this is what a lot of people want. If you are new to the TOEFL, this is not going to make a whole lot of sense. So I will explain all of this in more detail, but there's some people who just want a template and want to move on with their life. So I wanted to put that there first. But we're going to do a lot together. And on test day, you only speak for a minute. So you're like, why am I watching a 15-minute video for something that takes a minute? Good point. You'll see why as I start explaining things. But the most important thing is for you to sound natural and comfortable. You're going to hear a lot of tips, a lot of tricks, a lot of strategy, and then, it can kind of confuse you a bit because there's just so many things to keep in mind, and then you're kind of confused when it's time to speak. I really want to encourage you to just take a few things from this video here, just 1 or 2 things that you think are really helpful, and then use that to help you on test day. All right, so now with that out of the way, let's get into what you're going to know and what you're going to learn. You're going to learn how the question will look for question 2. You're going to learn how to give a very high scoring response. You're going to learn how to use a template and other important vocabulary. And you're going to know how to use technology to grade your writing. Or grade your speaking. Okay, so we're going to do all that together. If you want all of this in a PDF document, download the Speaking 26 guide. Pretty much all of this information is there as well. Link in the description. All right, introduction. Question number 2. This is after question 1, and this is question 2 of 4 questions. This is a campus announcement. You will read a passage. You'll listen to a conversation about the passage. You have 30 seconds to prepare your response, and then you will have 60 seconds to speak. So this is about something on campus. So you have 45 seconds to read and take notes. So on test day, you have a piece of paper and a pencil, and you can take notes. I'll talk about note-taking a little bit later, but it'll look something like this, and it's about this length, the reading text. Okay, so you have 45 seconds to read this, and then it disappears. It goes away forever. It won't come back. You might also get a letter, so that's a little bit different. This first example is an announcement. This is a letter. A letter is usually a proposal. I'll talk more about this a little later, but that's the difference between the two. You'll then listen to a conversation between a man and a woman about the reading, so it'll always be between a man and a woman. And one person is going to do most of the speaking, and they will have an opinion about the announcement or about the letter. After that, you have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You look at your notes, you get ready to speak, and then you have to speak for 60 seconds. You'll see the question also. The question almost always follows the same format. It's something like this. The man or woman expresses his or her opinion on and the topic, whatever it is. Switching school books, graduation ceremony changes. State her opinion and the reason she gives for holding that opinion. Or if it's a man, his opinion and the reasons he gives. So the question comes up, and then you have 30 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to speak after the preparation time. All right, so now you know what the question looks like. Let's look at some templates. I want you to think of this question and the way that you answer it like a reporter. You're reporting information. You read a passage, you listened to a conversation, and now you're going to speak about it like a reporter. If you ever watch the news, usually they give you some type of news event. There was a change to the campus, there is a new textbook policy, and then they interview people. What do you think? What do you think? And then the announcer, the reporter, speaks about it. That's pretty much what you're doing. You know, you read a passage, listen to a conversation, and you report about it. So think like a reporter here. Like all the questions, starting your response is the hardest part. The hardest part of this test is just the timer and speaking. When it says 3, 2, 1, speak, and you have to speak, it's really hard to do. It's hard to get used to. It's very unnatural. You don't do that any other time except on a test. So you want to know what you're going to say in the beginning. It's very important. Here are 3 different ways to start. Any way is fine. It's up to you. The reading passage announces a change on campus in particular. Okay, the reading passage announces, and it looks like there will be a change on the university campus, you see. So this reading passage is almost always a change on campus. It might be a new rule, you might change a little bit there, but anything is there is just some change. So taking this example, after reading this and taking some notes, I'll talk a bit about the letter later. The letter has a slightly different template. I'll talk about the letter later. I would say about 80% of the time it's an announcement, and about 20% of the time it's a letter. So this is less common, but I will talk about how to answer this question with a template a little later. It's pretty much the same thing, just a couple of words. So the reading passage announces a change to the school's textbook policy. Students will now have to download ebooks instead of buying paper books. The school is hoping that this new change will help reduce the amount of wasted paper used up by physical books while also making text more affordable for students. So that's it. I say the announcement from the change, I state the change and provide reasons for it. So the part in green is introducing the reading, announces a change to the school textbook policy, okay, and then I state the change. Students will now have to download ebooks and provide reasons. The school is hoping that this new change will help reduce the amount of wasted paper. Okay, so that's it. That's the introduction. The introduction is you state what the change is and the reasons for the change. Okay, so introduction, change, reasons for the change. You could also say this is because the major reasons for this change are the university believes this is a good idea because. I didn't say any of this. I could have said here, after the green, after the blue, this is because the school is hoping. I could have said that, but I didn't put that part of the template. But those are different ways to introduce reasons for the change. You can do that if you want. Okay? These are all just ideas to help you. Again, it's a lot of information. I'm going to give you a sample template to follow if you just want me to tell you what to do, but I want to give you a lot of different ideas. And that's because some words, some sounds will be harder for you than others. For example, some people have some trouble saying university, a word that begins with this sound, this U sound. University, some people say, or universidad, or they say it more like their own language. So maybe you don't want to say the word university because your pronunciation is not so great, so you want to say something else instead. So I don't want to give you something that you have to say that fits everybody. Everybody's different. I'm going to give you some ideas. Pick the idea that you like the most. After you introduce the reading, you transition to the listening. You start talking about the listening. So the man in the conversation, okay, that's the part in green, loves this idea, so talks about his opinion. And then you say, what's one specific reason? So in the listening, one speaker will either agree or disagree with the change. Usually they disagree, but in this example, we're going to look at him agreeing with the change. And then 2 reasons why they agree. First reason, he starts off by saying that he had discussed the issue in his environmental studies class before, and they came to the conclusion that the production of paper for books and other materials is having a huge impact on the environment. So that's what he said. I know you haven't heard this, so don't worry, you haven't heard this. I'm just showing you how to answer this question, okay? Okay, so these are different transitions that you can use for question 2. So it's up to you. Now, again, I highlighted in red, wholeheartedly supports, completely opposes. So these words, adverbs like completely opposes, not just opposes, completely opposes, not just supports, wholeheartedly supports. Phrases help your score, but some of these words are hard to say. Wholeheartedly is a very difficult word to say. You do not have to say that, okay? These are just ideas to help you. Take what you want. Pick a few things. Take what you want to help you, after you watch this, practice a question 2, and then take a couple things that you think are helpful. Okay, so now at this point, I'm about 30 seconds, 35 seconds in. I still have about 25 seconds left. So I have to talk about the second reason for his opinion. He also mentions that electronic readers are much cheaper. Students will only have to pay a one-time fee up front, $300, I think, and then everything else is included, which is much cheaper than buying each individual textbook. All right, so there's the second reason. Here are some things you could say. He also mentions, secondly, he explains, he goes on to say, secondly, the man supports this idea because any of those are fine. All right, and that's there it is right there. Now, the last part, your conclusion. It's optional. You don't have to do this, but you can if you have an extra 5 seconds. So basically, it's hard to speak for 60 seconds exactly. So that's really tough to do. I have a hard time doing it. So the conclusion though, and I'll read it here, as you can see, the man is a big fan of this new school policy. You can see that I didn't really add any new vocabulary. I'm just repeating what I've already said, that this man is in favor of this change. So that's why it's not necessary. You're repeating something you've already said a couple times. But if you look at the clock and you have like 5 seconds, okay, I'll just say this conclusion. All right, so use it as an extra 5 seconds in your pocket, that conclusion. As you can see, the man is a big fan of this new school policy, and this response is about 60 seconds. And here are some different ways you can conclude in conclusion. So to sum up, as you can see, so that's why. You'll also notice I use the phrase, he is a big fan of this new policy. So that's a kind of idiom. I don't know if I'll get points for that, but anyway, try something a little different besides agree. Something just change the vocabulary a little bit. And phrases usually score better. So for example, if I just put in conclusion, or as you can see is an expression. All of these words have to come together, as you can see. They have to be in the right order, and they have to be put together in the right pronunciation, almost like a single word, as you can see. That's hard to do. It's much easier to say conclusion, right? So as you can see, that's harder to say. So when you can, use some phrases that actually helps boost your score. Here's pretty much all the information I just said in one screenshot. So take a screenshot of this. This is pretty much your template. Pick the phrases that you like and use them on test day. So this is, and then this one is for the letter. So I haven't talked about the letter yet. So let me just say one quick thing about a letter. What's the difference between the letter and the regular announcement? The difference is for a letter. So here's a sample template, question 2. This is the announcement. If you want to just copy this, you use this one. The only thing that's different for a letter is the introduction. The letter proposes a change on campus in particular. The reading passage announces a change on campus. That's the only difference. You say, instead of reading passage, you say letter. Instead of saying announcement or announce, you say propose. Announce, propose. That's it. A proposal is an idea, like an official idea that you want people to think about. So that's proposal. So letters propose, announcements change or have an announcement or announce. Okay, so that's the only difference between the two. Right, so I hope that's clear. Sometimes people get a letter and it really confuses them. It's really not a big deal. It's the same exact thing. You just say propose instead of change. The conversation is the same. A man or a woman has an opinion and has reasons why they agree or disagree with the proposal. Same exact thing. All right. So let's talk about taking notes for TOEFL Speaking Question 2. This is kind of important because when you have to speak, the reading passage goes away and you have to remember what was in the reading passage and you have to remember what was in the listening passage. So let's talk a little bit about that. And before I do, I want to shout out the emergency course. This is an offer only for students on YouTube. $67 for the TOEFL Emergency Premium course. It's usually $97. This course is perfect for anybody who has about a month or less to prepare. There is a schedule, a 2-day schedule you can finish in 2 days, 1 week schedule, 2 week schedule, and a 1 month study schedule. Everything is laid out for you. All the videos that you need, all the practice you need. There's 6 full practice tests along with more practice for you for the TOEFL. Examples for speaking and writing, just a lot of things included, and it's pretty much everything you need in 1 month to prepare for the TOEFL. I've put everything into this course to help you, most of you guys who, if you have more than a month, if you have 2, 3, 4 months, this is probably not a good fit. I mean, it's okay for a month, but you'll probably run out of material. This is perfect for a month or less. So check out TOEFL Premium course that is only available for the YouTube audience, this deal. I'll put a link in the description below. So again, the question outline, you have to read an announcement and you listen to a conversation and then you speak. But when you speak, you have to rely on your memory of the reading and listening. Notes will help you remember. So here's the reading passage. And what I want to do is that these are the 2 goals you want to have for the reading passage. You want to identify the new rule and you want to find reasons for the new rule or change. So in my notes, I have the letters C, R1, R2. C is change. I'm looking for the change and the 2 reasons for the change. Okay? So that's what it looks like, something like that. And the first sentence says, beginning next semester, students will no longer be able to buy paper books. Instead, students will be required to download all of their books to an electronic book reader. So what I write is PPR, that's paper books, and it's going to change to electronic books. That's the most important thing. If you don't hear the reasons, don't worry about it. If you can't read everything in time, don't worry about it. Some people have trouble. They say, look, Josh, I can read the passage, but I can't take notes. If I take notes, I don't have enough time to read the passage. Okay. The most important thing is to read the passage. Do that first. And then the next step is to write down the change. At least write down the change. Okay, that's the one thing you want to do, is just you want to identify the change. That's really important because that's going to help you listen better. If you don't write down the reasons, that's okay. So the first step is I can read everything in 45 seconds. Okay, great. Next step. I can read everything in 45 seconds and I can write in my notes the change. Of course, you don't write whole words. You just write a couple little words here, abbreviations like I put. Then the last step is that writing down the change and the 2 reasons. If you don't have time, don't worry about it. But then here are the 2 reasons for the change. Socially irresponsible to continue to force students to buy books that require the use of natural resources like the trees. Okay, so paper means trees, and that makes people sad. I put equals sad. And then I put it's too much money. Students also complain about the price of the books. Okay, so I just wrote down like 6-7 words and about 3 or 4 or 5 symbols. So it shouldn't take you very long, but it's hard to do. This is a hard thing to do. So don't worry if you can't do all of it. This is just the kind of advice that I give. Just write down a couple words that will help trigger your memory. So you want to look at your notes and like, oh yeah, I remember. You're not going to read your notes. You're not going to write down whole words or sentences. Just a couple of little things that'll, oh yeah, that's right. That's what you want your notes for. Okay. Looking at number 3 and 4. So we did the reading. You're looking for the change and the reasons for the change. Now let's look at the listening, and we're listening for the speaker's opinions and reasons for their opinions. Usually one person is going to do most of the talking, either the man or the woman. And it might feel like they're both talking about evenly. That's okay. Just write down what you hear. But usually one person is talking a bit more and giving their opinion a bit more. So remember, the question is that it's going to ask you about the person's opinion on the topic. So the question is about the listening. So most of your information should be from the listening. So you really want to listen carefully, you really want to take notes as best as you can, and you want to include a lot of information from the listening, because the question is about the listening. The question is about the woman's opinion. Okay, so the only thing you really need to say about the reading passage is the change. You don't really even have to say the reasons for the change, because the woman will talk about it, or the man will talk about it in the conversation. So it's up to you, but just keep that in mind, is that the most important thing to talk about is the conversation. You don't want to talk too much from the reading. So you listen to a conversation. After this video, I'll put a link in the description to a speaking practice test so you can actually practice this. For this video here, I'm focused mostly on advice right now. So here is the transcript here. They start off with a little small talk. Hey Margaret, where are you off to? Well, I'm going to buy a couple of new books for next semester. And the man says, really? Didn't you hear the announcement? And she goes, what announcement? And then he kind of talks about the change. And I didn't write that down because I already have that in my notes from the reading, right? And then I hear the woman's opinion. All the way at the end, underlined in green, I still prefer paper books. So I write for the woman, paper books. I don't know whose opinion is more important right now. I'm just writing down what I hear. And then I hear the man. Really? Well, I love the idea. We actually talked about this in my environmental studies class last semester. We use up so many natural resources to produce the paper and books, and think of how many tens of thousands of books that are produced every year. We could really reduce our carbon footprint if we started relying on digital materials. So I wrote, he's pro-digital, he likes it. And he thinks there's too many books and they can reduce their carbon footprint. Okay, so that's what I wrote down. She talks about it. She says, I guess it's hard to argue with that. I like the feel of real books, but I suppose I can get used to an electronic reader. And he says, right, and best of all, it's cheap. Right now we spend hundreds, even thousands of dollars on books. My biology textbook cost me $100 alone, and now we have to pay is $300 one time, and that's it. All right, so he says cheaper. It's $300 one time. Let me read this. If you can write down a lot of notes, go for it. The more you can remember about the listening, the better. A lot of people stress about notes a lot. I'm gonna kind of blow your mind here for a second. A lot of people take no notes, and they do very well. Okay, so notes are optional. But if you can take more notes, usually that helps you focus better, and you can use it when you start to speak as well. But it's up to you. Experiment. Again, after this video, do a practice test, practice question 2, experiment with it, see what works best for you. All right, so there's the question, and then it's time to speak. And I have these notes here. I have my notes from the reading, I have my notes from the listening, and I'm going to use them to speak well and answer this question well. All right, and then this is my answer, this beautiful answer here, right? Okay, All right, so let me talk a bit about self-grading. There's a couple really useful tools you should be using. So the problem here is that when you're practicing speaking on your own, at home, you don't have access to a teacher. TSTprep.com, we have teachers, we have a speaking evaluation. You meet with a teacher and speak with them. I think it's the best way to kind of know your strengths and weaknesses, but it's not for everybody. Not everybody can afford it. And the good news is that there's a lot of free online tools and low-cost online tools for you to get really good feedback on your speaking. The first one I'm going to recommend is My Speaking Score. They use the same software that TOEFL uses, the SpeechRater software. It's the same on My Speaking Score. So this site will give you a very reliable score. You can rely on the score, and you can also see your strengths and weaknesses. You can see if it's vocabulary or grammar or speaking speed. It's really helpful. I definitely recommend this site, My Speaking Score. Another site that's it's free and paid, but a lot of it is free. You can do 30 minutes of practice for free, is ELSA Speech Analyzer. This is ELSA Speech Analyzer. Some of you might have used the ELSA app before. They also have something called Speech Analyzer. You can upload a TOEFL speaking sample and it'll give you a score. It'll give you a TOEFL score. It's not as reliable as My Speaking Score. It's a different grading rubric, but it gives you a lot of good information. You get information about your pronunciation, your word count, you get a transcript. It's just a lot of good things there. So definitely check out ELSA if you want more feedback on your speaking. So those are the two websites I recommend. And the reason I find these really helpful is because, if you look at ETS's grading rubric, it just tells you, okay, you're graded on description, delivery, language use, and topic development. If you read this, you're like, okay, this doesn't help at all, right? So you need kind of more specific feedback to help you when you're practicing speaking at home. So you can check out those two websites, and I'm also going to give you a checklist as well. So I'm not going to go through all these questions. You can do this more on your own, but these 9-10 questions will really help you kind of check your own speaking to see if there's certain things you need to work on. So what you should do at home is you do a question, you record your voice, you listen to your voice. So much fun. I know you hate your own voice. Everyone does. It just helps you a lot. So you listen to your own voice, and then you ask these questions and you judge your own speaking. So these questions will help you be a teacher, be a better judge of your own speaking. Here's your complete guide to TOEFL speaking question number 3. And we're going to do a lot together, but for some people, they really just want to know the template. What's the kind of structure for TOEFL speaking question 3? So I'm going to just give it to you right now. This is an example template. I'm kind of jumping way ahead. So this video is for beginners and even people who know about the TOEFL speaking already. But some people, they're really, really interested in the template, so I just wanted to give that first so you guys don't have to stick around and wait for it if you don't want to. But we're going to do a whole lot more than this, and I'm going to explain this in a lot more detail. So by the end of this, you're going to know how the question will look. We'll look at a sample question. I'll show you how to give a high scoring response, the type of structure you need. I'll also talk about templates and other important vocabulary that you should have for question number 3. And I'll also talk about how to use technology. I'll share certain websites and certain questions that you can use to help you grade your own speaking. And this is for question number 3. All this information is in the PDF download linked in the description below, the TOEFL Speaking 26 guide. Pretty much all the information here is also in that document as well. Everything is updated for the new version of the TOEFL test, so check that out at TST Prep, and I'll put a link. Okay, so, one more thing. The most important thing is for you to sound natural and conversational. So I'm going to talk a lot about this question. It's a 1-minute question. I'm going to talk about it for about 20 minutes. And you're like, okay, this is like way too much information for a 1-minute question. I understand that, and it could be stressful for you. Some people, they have so much information about the TOEFL that they have trouble focusing. I really want you to just focus on answering this question well, sounding natural, sounding comfortable when you speak. So just cherry pick a few things, just take a few things from here that you will find helpful and use them on test day. I don't expect you to follow every single piece of advice, exactly. I expect you to take some things that you like, leave some things that you don't like, and find a way that works for you. Okay, but I'm going to give you a lot of information. So here we go. Let's get into it. Question number 3. So, introduction and walkthrough. Let's go through the question. There are 4 questions in the TOEFL speaking. This is question 3. This is your first academic question. You will be forced to talk about an academic topic. Remember, TOEFL is a test to see if you're ready for university, so pretty natural for you to have some questions about academic topics. And the first thing you have to do is you have to read a passage. You have 45 seconds to read. This is one that we're going to look at today about swarm intelligence. It's about that length on test day. And then you have to listen to a lecture about the reading passage. So a teacher will talk about swarm intelligence. They'll say, now listen to a lecture about this topic in a biology class. And then you listen to the topic in a biology class. And he'll probably talk about swarm intelligence and some examples of swarm intelligence. After the listening, you'll have 30 seconds to prepare, and they'll show the question. They'll say something like this: using the examples from the lecture, explain the concept of swarm intelligence. So the question is almost always the same. It's basically explain the topic, whatever it is. Using the examples from the lecture, explain the concept of, and whatever the topic is. In this case, we're going to talk about swarm intelligence. It's okay if you have no idea what that is. A lot of times on test day, you won't know about the topic. It's totally fine. Everything you need to speak about the topic is in the passage. All right, so don't worry about that. And then you have to speak for 60 seconds. And that's tough. It's tough to speak for a very specific amount of time. That's why we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about this, because you have to go 3, 2, 1, speak, and you have to start speaking, and you have to stop at exactly 1 minute. So it's very specific. It's very different than how you normally speak every day. So we have to have some tips and tricks and strategies to help you do that. Some topics that are pretty common: biology, psychology, business, and history and art. I would say biology is probably the most common. Let's talk about templates. So we're going to go through an example, and I'm going to show you some different templates. Before I do, I want you to think about this question like you are a teacher. So you want to imagine, now I know not everybody wants to be a teacher, it's not for everybody, but I want you to imagine that this reading passage and this listening passage, after you do it, after you read and listen, you have to explain it to somebody. Maybe a high school student is a good example. And so when you're teaching and explaining to somebody, your voice changes. Like this voice that I have right now, this is not my normal voice. This is not how I talk to my friends. This is not how I talk to my family. Your voice changes depending on the situation. But notice how when you're teaching, my voice goes up a little more. I'm a little bit softer, a little bit nicer. I have more music in my speech. So when you're talking like a teacher, you want somebody to listen. You want somebody to understand. So your voice changes a little bit. So that's a good mindset to keep in mind. You're not trying to make a business deal and talking a mile a minute, okay? You're trying to teach somebody something. So, starting your response is tough. A good introduction will help you feel confident, will help you start strong. It's something I talk about a lot, is starting strong is one of the best ways to improve your confidence, because when it says, ready, speak now, it's really uncomfortable. I don't know, swarm intelligence. Just try to get right into it. Okay, the topic is, so let's look at some introductions. According to the reading, swarm intelligence is, and you define it, the reading passage describes a concept known as swarm intelligence. The lecture is about swarm intelligence, which is, okay. So this is the topic, this is the reading passage, and this is my first sentence. According to the reading, swarm intelligence is when a bunch of different insects of the same species are able to combine and connect their thoughts so hundreds of individuals can think and act as one. So in the beginning, I introduce the topic, in this case swarm intelligence, and then I give the definition. It's a bunch of different insects of the same species that are able to combine and connect their thoughts so hundreds of individuals can think and act as one. All right, next step is I have to talk about the lecture. So I've talked very little about the reading, mostly about the lecture. So these are the different transitions to the lecture. I'll just read the first one. In the lecture, the professor delves deeper into the subject by explaining, and then you talk about the first example. So basically, when you're doing this question number 3, you have a reading passage, you read it for 45 seconds, it goes away, and then you listen to a lecture about the reading passage. And the lecture will usually give 1 or 2 explanations, examples about the passage. So that's why we're going to use this transition. So in the lecture, transition, the professor delves deeper into this subject by explaining that ants use this type of thinking when gathering food. So that's the first example, ants gathering food. And then I explain it more. One group of ants will find a way to the food source and release pheromones to mark the trail. Other ants will then follow the pheromone scent. Okay, got that. And then the next thing is where I say, he goes on to say. Now, so again, the listening, there are 2 examples. So that's what you're going to do. Next, you're going to introduce the second example. He or she goes on to say. Secondly, the professor describes. The professor goes on to say. So just pick whichever one fits you best. Remember, the reason why I give you more than one way of using a template is because everybody's different. Your pronunciation is different. You might have trouble saying a word like secondly. That might be a little bit difficult for you. Or you might have trouble with a word like describes. Maybe the cr sound is a little bit hard for you to make. So you want to say explain instead. Use words and phrases that you feel comfortable and confident using. It'll help you on test day. So there's my second example. He goes on to say that honeybees use this type of intelligence when looking for a new place to live. And I expand on it, I explain it more. In fact, a queen bee might send out a pheromone that attracts thousands of other bees that come together and form a kind of temporary home where the bees can survive. Okay, so I talk about the example in more detail, and I use the word in fact. Here are some other phrases that you can use to give more information. Further still, additionally, moreover, or in other words. So these are different ways to add information. You don't have to do that, but I did it. And then if you notice, I have a little conclusion there. It says, so after listening, I now have a better understanding of what swarm intelligence is. So these are different ways of finishing up, of doing a conclusion. I made a kind of different one for question number 3. All these work, all these are fine. Your conclusion is optional. You don't have to put a conclusion. I put one here. Like for all the questions in TOEFL Speaking, your conclusion is like an extra 5 seconds in your pocket. If you need to speak for more time, use a conclusion. If you're like, okay, I said everything from the reading and from the listening, I'm done, but I still have 5 seconds, 10 seconds, okay, let me say a conclusion. But if you are speaking and you get cut off and you don't have time for a conclusion, no problem. All of the templates are here, all the possible things you can say. I've talked about all of this and I put the time here too. Take a screenshot of this, keep it handy for yourself and refer back to it when you need it. But yeah, again, use the phrases, use the words that you feel comfortable using. And for some people, they're like, just tell me what to do. I don't want to pick. Okay, here's the sample template. You can use this template and you'll do just fine. Okay, so here's the sample template. Again, you could take a screenshot of it if you like. So let's talk about taking notes now. So that's very important because when you have to speak, you can't see the reading and you can't see the listening. So you have to rely on your memory. But you also have a piece of paper and a pencil, and you could take notes, and you could look at your notes. So let's talk about some ways to do that. But before I do, check out TOEFL Emergency Course Premium. So this is an offer only for the YouTube audience. $97 usually is now $67. This is for anybody who has a month or less to prepare. 2 months is okay, but if you have 2 months or more, then I think you could find something else with more practice. I mean, you could use this, but I think you'll go through most of the material in about a month or 2. This has a study plan. If you only have 2 days to prepare, 1 week to prepare, 2 weeks to prepare, or 1 month to prepare. So of course, 2 days is pretty intense. It's a pretty intense 2 days, but you can do it in 2 days. I include only the most important information for TOEFL, the best tips and tricks that you need to get the highest possible score on test day. So that's why I made this course, TOEFL Emergency Premium. some people, they have more than a couple days to prepare, up to a month. This is perfect. Has, I think, 6 complete tests, has more practice questions. Check it out. I'll put a link in the description. This is only for the YouTube audience, so you won't find this link anywhere else. All right, TOEFL Emergency Premium. So again, this is the outline for question number 3. You have 45 seconds to read, and then you listen to a lecture, and then you have a question that you prepare for, and then you speak. Let's look at this in a little more detail, and let's look at how to take notes. So when you're reading the passage, what should you be thinking about? What should you be looking for? What do you need to know when you speak? If you remember from my response, I didn't say a lot from the reading. So you don't have to actually write a lot. You only have to identify the topic, which is usually the title, and define it. So they'll give you the title, swarm intelligence, and then you have to say what swarm intelligence is. That's pretty much it. That's all you really need from the reading passage. I have this part highlighted in red that says additional notes. You can put additional notes, other things that you think are helpful from the reading passage, but it's not necessary. All you have to do is write down the title and what it means. So swarm intelligence, the topic, and then definition, hundreds of organisms work together to benefit the group. I'll also add that in the question, they tell you what the topic is. They say, using the examples from the talk, please explain what swarm intelligence is. So you actually don't even have to write down the topic, but I think it's a good idea. So it's up to you, if you want to or not. But definitely write down the definition, what it means. It'll be helpful. Now, some people say they can't write notes and read at the same time. If you have to pick one, read. Focus on reading and understanding the reading, and only take notes if you can understand the reading and take notes at the same time. If it's something that you're really struggling with, try to work on it. Try to say, okay, I'm going to write down just 2 words from the reading. And then tomorrow, okay, I'm going to just write down 3 words from the reading. So it's up to you how to do it, but focus on the reading and understanding the reading first. These are my notes here. I wrote a couple additional things. Clearly, these are too many notes. Let me just say that. This is too many notes. I prepared this, and so I had a lot of time. This is not like the TOEFL, so I would say you're probably going to write 5, 6, 7, 8 words. This is too much. So don't worry about this, but just want to show you an example of some things that I wrote down. You won't need this information. So notes are not as important as comprehension. Understand first, write second. So make sure you understand what you're reading first. If then you have some time, write down some notes. So after you do that from the reading, you want to identify the first example and second example from the listening. So it's an example or an illustration or a characteristic or a rule or something like that. So there's 2 things in the listening, and you have to understand what they are, write them down, and write down any details you can. So it'll say, now listen to a lecture in biology. And these are what my notes will look like. I'm looking for example and any details, and the second example and any details. So that's what I'm listening for. When you have a plan of what you're listening for, you will be much more attuned to the listening. So a lot of people, when they start listening on TOEFL, they're just like, I'm going to write down everything I hear. That's not what you should be doing. You should be focusing on the 2 examples and any details about the 2 examples. This is a long transcript of what the lecture says. We're not going to listen to the lecture here, but this is a long transcript. That's a lot of information, okay? Obviously, you can't write down all this information. It's going to be hard to remember all this information. So you just want to write down a couple things. The first paragraph is all set up. Second paragraph, ants, they work together to find stuff, find food. The individual ant, I'll read the part highlighted in red. Well, the individual ants mark the route with their scent, also known as a pheromone. So I put route with pheromone. By the way, if you have no idea how to write pheromone, just write down what you hear, like F-E-R-mone or something. This scent left by one individual ant will be sensed and followed by other members of the colony. And so I wrote one pheromone followed by others. I could have wrote the number 1 there instead of 1. But anyway. Okay. And the more ants that follow the same trail, the more pheromones they leave behind. The path turns into a kind of ant superhighway. So I wrote ants follow the same trail. They don't go another way. Okay. You don't have to take notes. These are my notes. You don't have to write as many notes as I do. it's up to you. I recommend them because when it's time to speak, it's hard to remember all this stuff. Okay, so your notes kind of serve as a trigger for your memory. The second example, honeybees, okay? And then I read this whole thing. During adverse weather conditions, a thunderstorm, for example, bees may lose their nest and must find a new home. However, it takes time to find an ideal location and build their new home. So I wrote lose nest and storm. So the queen bee will find a branch on a tree and send out pheromones that the worker bees follow. Once they find the queen, the worker bees will collect and press together, forming a kind of giant pine cone that can include up to 10,000 bees, if you can believe it. Cool! All right, so then they say form pine cone, and they die if they're not in a collection. And I wrote that down. So I have my notes, have the reading, have the listening, time for me to speak, and I can use these to help. This is a lot of notes. Don't have to write this much. This is too much. I'm just showing you an example for a video about question 3, so I want to just show you everything, but you don't have to write this much. Focus on just speaking well and understanding what you heard and what you read about. And then you answer the question, 30 seconds to prepare, and then you give a beautiful speaking response like this one. All right, so that's that. Let me talk a bit about the last part, self-grading. How do you grade yourself? Well, most people, they don't have access to a teacher. At tstprep.com, we have teachers that do speaking evaluations. A lot of people like it. I highly recommend it, but it's not for everybody. Not everybody can afford that. One site that I highly recommend is My Speaking Score. And the good thing about this site is that they use the same software as ETS, as the TOEFL. It's called SpeechRater. So the score that you get on your speaking on this site will be very similar or the same as you'll get on test day. Maybe not, I shouldn't say that, it depends, but it's the same scoring. It's scored the same way. So you can also find your strengths and weaknesses really well with this site. So I highly recommend My Speaking Score. Again, I'll put a link in the description. And another site that's free, actually, you can use it for 30 minutes for free, is ELSA Speech Analyzer. This is not TOEFL exactly, but they give you AI-powered feedback on your speaking, and you can find out if you're saying enough words per minute, if your pronunciation is off, if you need some help linking words together, if you have some problems with intonation. There's a lot of things here that gives you a lot of good information. I highly recommend ELSA Speech Analyzer, so I'll put a link in the description there as well. The reason why those sites and working with a teacher is so helpful is because these rubrics, like this is from ETS, this is the grading rubric for TOEFL, it's not very helpful. It tells you delivery, you have to deliver it really well, language use, topic development. You can read this and you think, okay, I still don't really get what my score would be or what I can do better. So that's why I made a checklist for each question type. They're pretty similar for the integrated questions. And so this is the checklist. So basically what you want to do is you want to do a question number 3, record your voice, listen to your voice, fun. Everybody loves their own voice. Nah, not really. But if you want to improve, that's how you get better. You listen to your own voice and you ask yourself these questions. Did I speak for 57 to 60 seconds? Was my introduction 15 seconds or less? And so on. You can ask yourself these questions and you could start to find things that might be some trouble for you that you want to improve before test day. Some people feel like this is the toughest question. Let's talk about it together. And let me jump way ahead and just give you a template right off the bat, because some people, they just want a template. They just want to know how to structure their response. So there it is. But if you stick around, you're going to learn a lot. We're going to do a lot together. And so I'm going to give you a lot of tips and tricks and strategies and templates and all that good stuff. But keep in mind that your most important goal is to sound comfortable, natural, confident. A lot of times when people do these videos and they learn a lot of information and they're you're pretty excited and there's a lot to think about, and sometimes that makes you pretty confused. Like you can't give a good response because there's too many other things in your head. So just take a couple of these tips and tricks, practice a couple of them, take it slow. Remember, your goal is to sound comfortable and natural, so that's the most important thing. That's why this video is so long, is because I just want to give you pretty much everything I know about this question, and then you can take what you want and you can use what you want. All right, so let's get into it. TOEFL Speaking Question 4. By the end of this, you're going to know how the question looks, how to give a high-scoring response, how to use a template and other important vocabulary, and also how to grade your response with certain technology that I'll show you at the end. All this information is in the free guide, so check it out, 26 plus. There is a link in the description below, and you can get all this information on a PDF so you can have it handy anytime. So check that out. So let's talk about the question, introduction and walkthrough. So this is the last question in the TOEFL Speaking. You will be done with the TOEFL Speaking after this. You will listen to a lecture about a topic. That's the first thing you'll do. There's no reading for this one. That's the difference between question 3 and question 4. Question 3, there's a reading and listening passage. Question 4, there's only a listening passage. And it'll look like this. It'll say directions. You will now listen to part of a lecture. You'll then be asked a question about it. After you hear the question, you have 20 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to speak, and then it'll start playing. After the lecture finishes, you have 20 seconds to prepare, as I mentioned, and then you have a question here. So the question format, pretty much the same as question 3. Using the examples from the lecture, explain the concept of, and maybe swarm intelligence, maybe aggression is the one that we're going to talk about today. So whatever the topic is will be there, but the format is pretty much the same. And then you have to speak for 60 seconds. And it's hard to speak for exactly 60 seconds, and that's what we're going to talk about more right now. Some common topics are biology, psychology, business, history, and art. There's no way to predict the topic you'll get on test day. A lot of times it's biology, a lot of the time. All right, so let's talk about how to answer this question. Let's talk about templates. For this question, like question 3, I want you to think like a teacher. So I want you to get your teacher voice. Now, what's your teacher voice? Well, that's the voice that you are used to hearing me speak in. It's a kind of musical voice that goes up and down. I try to have a little bit of a softer tone when I'm speaking. I want you to listen and I want you to understand what I'm saying. So, but I don't talk this way when I talk to my friends. I don't talk this way when I talk to my family. I don't talk this way, on the street every day. I don't think. So anyway, when you talk like a teacher, you want somebody to listen, you want somebody to understand. So you want to keep that in mind. You're not going to talk like you're in a business meeting where you need to go fast, 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 fast. You want to explain the concept, explain the topic, take your time, think like a teacher. Imagine that the person listening doesn't know about the topic and you're trying to teach about it. Starting is the hardest part. We have to speak for 60 seconds. There's a timer. It says 3, 2, 1, speak. And then you have to speak, and that's really uncomfortable, awkward. Let's start with the introduction. Start strong. A couple different ways you can start. The professor goes into a ton of detail about topic, aggression, and then you describe it. The reason why we use these phrases, they help you start strong, and also you can use some phrases, for example, in the lecture. Instead of just saying, the professor says, you say, in the lecture. That's a phrase that you're bringing together. Or a ton of detail. A ton of detail is a phrase that you have to say together. A ton of detail. You have to bring these together. But if I just say says, that's just one word by itself, that's it. But if I say a ton of detail, that's a phrase. I have to bring words together. So phrases help your score. You don't want to go crazy. You don't want to say phrases the whole time, but you do want to think about some ways of improving your score, and one way is by using some of these useful phrases. But let's just read the question. It says, using the points and examples from the talk, explain the 2 main theories as to why aggression exists. So this is about the theories why aggression exists. So here's the listening passage. It's a lot of information. We'll talk more about this a little later, but I just want you to see it here. You can pause the video and read it if you'd like, but you don't have to do that. And I start off by saying the professor goes into a ton of detail about human aggression, which is behavior that causes a person to experience psychological or physical harm. So how did I start? I introduced the topic and I elaborated on it. I described it, I defined it. It's about human aggression, which is behavior that causes a person to experience psychological or physical harm. And then I go on. After introducing the topic, the lecturer describes 2 theories about why aggression exists. That's the question, right? Look at the question on top. It says, using points and examples from the talk, explain two main theories as to why aggression exists. So not just about aggression, but why it exists. So the way that this lecture is set up is that they introduce a topic, they describe the topic, and then they'll have two examples or two, in this case, characteristics or theories, or 2 points or 2 reasons, 2 something to talk about the topic. Just like question 3, except only now it's all in one lecture. Instead of a reading passage and a listening, now it's only a listening, and they introduce the topic and then 2 reasons, 2 causes, 2 characteristics, 2 theories, 2 examples of the topic. All right, so after introducing the topic, the lecturer mentions that. In the lecture, the professor describes or discusses. First, the professor talks about any of these are okay. Pick the one that works best for you. I give you all these ideas because you might have some trouble with the pronunciation of some of these words. For example, some people might have trouble with lecturer. Lecturer is a hard word to say. There's a lot of R's there. So you might just want to say teacher or professor. So that's what you want to do second. You want to introduce the first example or point and provide details about it. After introducing the topic, the lecturer describes 2 theories about why aggression exists. The first theory is that aggression is a product of evolution. In the past, life was much more dangerous than it is today. And so, males would act aggressively in order to show that they can protect their mates and offspring. Women gravitated towards more aggressive men and passed on this trait through their genes. Okay, so I'm explaining what I heard in the passage. All this is from the passage. Now, I have to talk about the second example, and that's what this part is here. So here are some phrases to move to the second example. He goes on to say, or she goes on to say. Secondly, the professor describes, or the professor provides another example of why aggression exists by discussing. And then the second example. She goes on to say that another popular theory on aggression is known as the social learning theory, which proposes that aggression is a learned behavior. For example, children who observe a lot of violence at home or through movies and video games are more likely to demonstrate aggressive behavior towards others. So then I introduce the second example and give details about it. This last part, the conclusion, is optional. Just like all the question types in TOEFL, if you watch the other ones, you've heard me say this already. But yeah, the conclusion is optional. You can use any of these phrases. It's up to you. Your conclusion is an extra 5 seconds in your pocket. If you need it, use it. If you have like 50 seconds and you still have 10 seconds, you're like, okay, I'll say a conclusion. Or 55 seconds and you have 5 seconds. But for the most part, you could just speak and not have a conclusion. It's totally fine. And again, the reason is because you're not saying anything new. You're repeating information that you already said. So after hearing this lecture, I now have a better understanding of human aggression and why it exists. But it can also, help your word count a little bit. Word count is important. So that's another reason to maybe boost it up a little bit. You can add a conclusion. All right. So this is everything I just talked about, all laid out. You could take a screenshot of this here. This is your possible template, and just pick a few things that you like here that you can feel like you use on test day. All right. So now, this is the template that I'll just give to you. Some people, they're like, look, Josh, I just want you to tell me what to say. I don't care what it says. Just tell me what to say. Here it is. This is what you can say. Here's your template. Okay, if you don't feel like picking it yourself. People struggle with taking notes, so let's talk about it. Before I do, I want to shout out the Emergency Course Premium Package from TST Prep. This is ideal for most students, I think. It comes with a study plan. 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, or 1 month. And all you have to do is follow the plan. And everything is laid out for you. All the practice tests are there. There's about 6 practice tests. All the videos includes just the best tips and tricks and strategies. I mean, everything that you need so you don't waste any time and you know exactly what you need to do every day before you take the test. Check it out at tstprep.com. Well, actually, don't check it out at TST Prep. Go to the link in the description because this offer is only for the YouTube audience. So it's usually $97, but $67 for the YouTube audience. So go to the link in the description because that's where you'll get this discount. Okay. If you have about a month to prepare or less, do this. It'll save you a lot of time, a lot of headaches. You'll know exactly what you need to do. Okay. Now, let's get back to taking notes. So if you remember, you listen to a lecture and then you have to speak about it. Of course, you can't listen and speak at the same time, so you have to remember what you heard. Now, how do you remember what you heard? Well, keep in mind that some people don't take notes at all, and that's fine. There are some people who don't take notes and they score very well. They just listen, focus on what they're listening, and they just listen. You know, it's about 2 minutes long, the listening passage, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. And they're like, okay. And maybe they'll write down a couple notes after they listen and then speak. That's totally fine. Some people feel like they can't write down and listen at the same time. They're just not used to it. It's not comfortable. When you're writing, you're not listening. So if that's you, it's something you might have to practice. But for the most part, you don't have to do it if you don't want it. If you do decide to take notes, or even if you're not going to take notes and you're just listening, these are your 4 goals. You want to identify the topic, define the topic. So it's going to be, remember that I want you to think like a teacher. And if you're a teacher, you're talking about something new. If you're talking about something new, you have to say what it is. So you're going to talk about aggression. You're going to define it. Aggression is when you hurt other people or yourself, psychological or physical harm. And then you have to give 2 examples of it. Now, this is about why aggression exists. One theory about why aggression exists is this. Another theory about why aggression exists is this. So this is what you're trying to listen for. The topic, the definition, the 2 examples. All right, so you have your goals. It does not matter if you know about the topic. Everything you need will be in the passage. Some people, they hear a topic and they freak out. They're like, I have no idea what that is. I've never heard of that before. Everything you need to answer the question is in the passage. It's an English test, not a content test. It's not about if you know about some biology or anything like that. It's an English test. Everything you need will be there. Just listen carefully. Focus on what you know. This is how your notes could look. You're not going to write down all this, but you're listening for the topic, definition, example 1, example 2. So that's what your notes should look like. This is the transcript, and I'll show you a little bit about how I took notes here. So where it says T, topic, I wrote human aggression. Today we're going to talk about human aggression. Okay, that was easy. They just introduced the topic right in the beginning. They don't always do that, but sometimes they do. And then the definition, aggression is considered any negative or harmful behavior that causes psychological or physical harm. So I wrote negative behavior, psych, physical harm. All right. And the theory, and I also highlighted 2 main theories as to why aggression exists. So why exists question. So that's the topic. It's not just aggression, but why it exists, right? The second paragraph, it says, aggression is a product of evolution, the part underlined in green. I wrote that down because evolution. And now the part highlighted in red, lots of words. So I'm going to try to just write down the most important information. Men felt the need to act aggressive in order to both protect their mate and perpetuate their genes. Females tended to gravitate towards males they felt could keep them and their eventual offspring safe. So I wrote down danger in the past, men protect mate and offspring. Attract women, women want safety. Okay, so I just wrote that down. Again, you don't have to write anything down. If it's too hard for you, don't worry about it. Right? But that's just an example. And then it goes to the next part of the lecture, and the part highlighted in green, social learning theory, which takes the stance that aggression is something human beings learn to do, not something innate or instinctual. So I wrote social learning theory. And then children who observe violence at home are more likely to exhibit violent behavior. And I wrote learn from social environments and violence at home and movies and video games. So I have my notes. Remember, notes are not as important as comprehension. Understand first, write second. I can't say this enough. Understand first, write second. Okay, but here are my notes, and now I'm ready to speak. And to be honest, when I'm speaking, I'm not really reading my notes. I'm just speaking from what I remember, and I'll look at my notes to see like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, the first example. And what was the second? Oh yeah, second example, social learning theory. So it's going to be hard to remember all this stuff when you're speaking. So that your notes are there to kind of trigger your memory. So you don't have to, this is a lot of notes. You don't have to write this many notes. You can write probably like 50% of this and be totally fine. Okay, so these are a lot of notes. Don't have to do that much. All right, and then the question comes up and it's time to speak. And I give a beautiful response based on my notes and everything that you've learned. So after you have your beautiful response, you might wonder, well, how beautiful is it? So let's talk about self-grading really quickly. And Of course, at TSP Prep, we have teachers that do a speaking evaluation, but it can be expensive and some people can't afford it. So let me show you some different things you can do at home. My Speaking Score. This is a website that uses the same technology as TOEFL, as ETS. It's called SpeechRater, and it gives you a speaking score. This will give you a very accurate score on your speaking, similar to what you'll probably get on test day. It'll also tell you your strengths and weaknesses and what you need to do to improve. I really like this site. I highly recommend it. My Speaking Score. It's very reliable. Another site that's free, actually, you can record 30 minutes of speaking for free, is Elsa Speech Analyzer. Again, I'll put a link in the description. You can speak for up to 30 minutes for free. I recommend doing a TOEFL speaking practice, 1 minute, and uploading your response here and seeing what the results are. The results are not the same as TOEFL. They don't grade you the same way as TOEFL, but it gives you a lot of good information that does matter for TOEFL. For example, your word count, or your pronunciation, or your rhythm. So these are important things. Elsa gives you feedback on it. Check it out. So the reason why it's important to use some of these tools, and I'm going to show you one more thing to do, is because if you go to ETS, the company that makes the TOEFL, and you ask, how am I graded on my TOEFL speaking? How do I judge my speaking score? It'll give you this template, this rubric. You're graded on your description, the general description. You're grading on delivery, language use and topic development, and it's all pretty general and vague. You really won't know what you have to do to get better. Another thing you can do is this checklist. So these are 9 questions that you can use and answer these questions after you record your voice. So do a TOEFL speaking question 4 and ask yourself these questions, and you'll be able to see some things that you need to do better for question 4. So the first speaking secret you should know is that you want to fix the easy speaking dimensions first. Now, what do I mean by dimensions? So when you're graded on your speaking, there's a bunch of different dimensions, but let me simplify it. And let me ask you, which do you think is the easiest to improve? Your pronunciation, your grammar, vocabulary, structure, speaking speed, or prosody? Prosody is like the way that you speak, the music of it. If you need to improve your speaking, which do you think is the easiest to improve? What's going to be the fastest? And I'm going to tell you the answer. It's structure. So structure is going to be the first thing that you want to improve, because that's going to be the easiest thing to improve. And how do you improve structure? I'm going to talk about all these dimensions, I believe most of them, but let me start with structure. So how do you improve structure? Well, before I say that, the reason why we focus on structure is because when you focus on grammar or vocabulary or pronunciation or speech music, which is prosody, these are fossilized habits. These are things that you kind of have, since you're at a more advanced level, you've kind of have these strong habits in your in your mind that just kind of come out without thinking. So they're a much harder thing to fix. They are fixable, they are workable, but they're just harder. So structure is kind of the easiest thing to work on first. And the easiest way to work on structure is to have a template, is to memorize an introduction. The introduction is the most important part of your template. And the reason why that even if you don't want a template, I recommend an introduction. It's because the introduction helps you start, because on the TOEFL, you have a timer and it says, okay, you have to speak in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, speak. And speaking on command like that is very awkward, unnatural. We're not used to it. So almost always, if you don't know how you're going to start, there'll be a moment where you have to think. You're like, okay, so, and then you start speaking. You don't want to waste a second of time when you're doing the TOEFL speaking. Every second counts. So you want to start strong, have an introduction planned for each of the 4 questions. Here are some different examples from question number 1. I have more examples here from question number 2, where you have to talk about a reading passage, and you have to start with the reading passage that announces a change on campus in particular, and then you talk about the change. This is for question 3, where you have to read about an academic topic, and then you listen to a lecture about it, you want to start with the reading. So if you know how you're going to start, it helps your structure. It helps you stay organized. This is for question 4, the last TOEFL speaking question, where you listen to a lecture and you talk about the topic. The professor goes into a ton of detail about the topic, which is, and then you define it. So you can use any of these. I recommend using the one that you feel most comfortable with, but just know how you're going to start. This is in the 26 Plus guide. It's a free PDF. It's like 25 pages long. You can download it, link in the description below. There are more examples and more templates that you can practice with. So, the first secret, again, is to focus on dimensions that are easier to fix. Structure is easier to fix. And one way that you can help your structure a lot is to have an introduction prepared for each of them. Every second counts. So you want to make sure you start strong. And then after you work on your structure, you have a template. The next thing is to work on high frequency words and phrases. So in other words, you want to practice with vocabulary that you know you're going to have to say on test day. That's one of the good things about TOEFL speaking, at least, is that it takes the English language, this big, huge thing, and compresses it down to 4 questions. And so you don't have to remember all the words in English. You don't have to be a perfect English speaker, but you can perfect some words that you know you're going to have to say on test day. So what are some things you know you're going to have to say? Well, you're probably going to have to add information. So discourse markers. These are things like in addition, as a matter of fact, actually. Another discourse marker is when you're emphasizing, in fact, more importantly, or when you're ordering ideas. Another reason, secondly, she goes on to say. I sometimes call these transition words, but these are words that connect ideas. This is a big list. I wouldn't recommend you memorize all of these, but memorize a few for each category. So you know how you want to start when you want to give an introduction, when you give an example. Make sure your pronunciation is great. Like if you have trouble with the phrase in addition, you say it and you practice it and it sounds like in addition. You know, okay, it doesn't sound good. Let me say in fact. In fact is a lot easier for me to pronounce. I'm going to say in fact instead of in addition. Pick phrases that are easier for you to say. Don't try to be this perfect speaker. Make your life easier. Practice things that you know you're going to have to say. You also know that you'll have to use the template. So, I mean, you don't have to use it, but you should use one. And if you do use one, you have phrases that you know you're going to say. You know you're going to say, for example. You know you're going to have to say the reading passage. You're going to say in particular. You want to make sure that your pronunciation of these phrases is really good. You know you're going to have to say the man in the conversation. So make sure you say that very naturally. You don't want to say the man in the conversation is. You know you have to say this on test day, so practice this. Practice saying it in one breath. The man in the conversation is. These are phrases you know you're going to have to say. Make your life easier by practicing these high frequency phrases. You're going to have to say in the lecture. You're going to say according to the reading. You're going to say lecturer. This is a hard word to say. Lecturer. It has this 2 R sounds. Very difficult. You might say, okay, I don't want to say lecturer. My pronunciation is not so great. I'm going to always say professor instead. Have a plan for which words you want to use on test day. You're going to have to say topic. You're going to have to say mentions. And try to use these phrases goes on to say, goes on to say. Try to bring them together. Some other words that are very high frequency. This is from an old video I made about 19 words you have to say on test day. And this is the question number, 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And so you're going to have to say these words. If you say interesting, like interesting, you have 4 syllables. Practice saying it with 3. Interesting. You don't have to practice every word in English. Practice words that you know you're going to have to say. You know you're going to have to say example. If you're saying example, you're not saying it correctly. Example. If you're a Spanish speaker and you always say university, like universidad, Okay, so you're gonna have to say university. You have to say this on test day. It's a really hard habit to fix because your whole life you've been saying universidad. That's okay. This one word, you wanna say university. You wanna try to not worry about the other words that you have trouble pronouncing. Focus on this word. 20 more words that I think are really helpful. I teach these for writing class for uncountable nouns because they're common uncountable nouns. So people have trouble with articles. But these are also very useful words that you'll probably have to use, not probably, but you might have to use in the speaking, especially words like maybe research or technology or information or evidence. These are good words to know, especially for writing, but maybe even for speaking. Now, some students, when they struggle with vocabulary, they think they have to learn a lot of new words and phrases. You could do that, but just know that when you learn new words and phrases, a lot of times it sounds very unnatural. So just be a little careful with trying to use new vocabulary. Instead, focus on high frequency words and phrases you will definitely say on test day. And that will help your pronunciation, your vocabulary, and your speech music, your prosody. So, yeah, and as I mentioned already, I encourage students to create their own templates based on their knowledge of the tests, personal style, and preferred discourse markers. So make your own templates so you can feel really comfortable with what you're going to say. All right, and again, yeah, it's in the 26 plus guide. The next thing, the next secret I wish more students would know is that your speaking is judged based on 3 minutes and 45 seconds. I really want you to think about this for a minute. There are 4 questions. You are judged on these 4 questions on if you are fluent in English, if you're a fluent English speaker. That's 3 minutes and 45 seconds of speech. That is approximately, here's my math skills, about 530 words, okay? If you're speaking at a good pace. You are judged on your speaking based on 500 words, give or take. This is an incredible opportunity for you to show that you have an advanced level of speaking if you focus on studying for this test. Because again, it's just 500 words. Think of all the tens of thousands of words in English and all the different combinations and grammar and books and all these things. It can feel very, very daunting and very scary because there's always new words to learn. There's always things that you don't know, idioms you don't know, expressions you don't know. And same for me. I mean, I'm a native speaker. There's always something new that I don't know. But this test, you can prove your English in just 3 minutes and 45 seconds. That's why this is important. That's why you want to focus on these things: structure, grammar, vocabulary. Even, I'm not going to speak about it here, but even your template helps with grammar because you simplify your grammar. A template also helps with your speed because you can basically structure your response and know what should come first, what should come second, and how much you should include in each part. Right? Very important. If you need more help with this, if you have taken the test before and didn't get your speaking score, one thing a lot of students find helpful is group classes. They're usually in a group of 8 or less. Usually it's about 5 students. It takes a month. There are about 6 classes, and you work with other students who are advanced English speakers that are just struggling to get that 26. You have a teacher to give you feedback. You have support if you need questions. You have all the questions you have all the TOEFL speaking questions you need, and also all the questions you need answered are there as well. It's not for newcomers to the TOEFL, and it's not really for students who have like 6 months or a year to prepare. This is more for if you have about a month to prepare, you've taken the test before and you didn't get your score, and you need that just extra little help. Check it out, speaking group classes. And go to this link in the description because this price is only for the YouTube audience. Let me go to the 5th and final secret, which is that word count is a big part of your score. Now you might know this already, but let me explain it in a little more detail. And actually, I'll give you one thing you might find surprising about this too. So these are the scoring dimensions from TOEFL Speaking AI. This is courtesy of My Speaking Score, a great site that I recommend to students that gives you feedback on your speaking based on the speech rater that they use on TOEFL. So there are different dimensions, but one thing about the dimensions is that some are worth quite a bit. They have a big impact on your score. And some have very little impact on your score, like this repetitions. I'm not going to talk about each one, but your speed, your speaking rate, how fast you speak, and how often you pause, and how you can bring words together. This is all about, if you can do all these three things well, you can say a lot of words. You can say more words per minute. So this has a big impact on your score. Now, if you start speaking really quickly, this happens a lot to students from South Asia. They can speak very quickly, but then other parts of their score goes down, maybe pronunciation, maybe syllables, other things, vowel sounds, I'm sorry, not syllables, vowel sounds goes down. So there are things that might get hurt if you speak too fast. But the idea is that it has a big impact on your score as long as it doesn't hurt your pronunciation and other parts of your speaking. These are different ways to improve your speaking speed. It's kind of complicated, so I'm not going to go through all of them. But we talked about templates, we talked about phrases. A lot of people know about shadowing, so I would recommend you do that. Reduce sounds, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples of reduced sounds right now. So what that means is that there are some phrases that we tend to bring together. So for example, a lot of sounds like a lotta. When I was. These are question one. Okay, so to be honest. That is why, that's why. So these are little things that you can kind of link together. This is for questions 2 to 4. Talks about. Types of. You don't have to do any of this, but these are just little tips for you to improve your speed. When practicing your pronunciation and in practicing your speed, definitely record your voice and repeat the same sentence multiple times, just 2 or 3 times, okay? And focus on high frequency words and phrases, which we talked about already with secret number 3. All right, you're about to take a complete TOEFL IBT speaking test. So get your voice recorder out and get ready to record your voice. Everybody's favorite thing to do. I know you love the sound of your own voice. Probably not. But let's do this together. And just like on test day, we will give you 4 questions and you will have to speak for 45 or 60 seconds. Make sure you read the directions carefully. Also, I will put sample answers at the end so you can listen to them. And there's also a PDF download that you can see the transcripts and other information about this test. So I'll put that in the description as well. Also, if you want to get your score as quickly and as easily as possible, check out the TOEFL Emergency Course only for you. The YouTube audience get this exclusive offer where you have study plans in this emergency course, 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, and 1 month. And also, this is all of the best tips, tricks, strategies, and practice all in one powerful package. So you can check that out. Again, there's a link in the description to that. But I think that's about it. All right, good luck, test takers, and I will see you at the end.
Directions. You will now be asked a question about a familiar topic. After you hear the question, you will have 15 seconds to plan your response and 45 seconds to speak. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Teenagers should work while they go to school so they can learn how to be more responsible. Provide details and examples to explain your opinion. You have 15 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 45 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Directions. You will now read a short passage and then listen to a conversation on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about the passages. After you hear the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. You have 45 seconds to read the passage below. You may begin reading now. Now listen to a conversation about the same topic.
Hey Lisa, did you read Johnny's letter in the school paper?
Yeah, I'm just finishing it now, actually. I can't believe he finally complained about it.
Yeah, and I think it's great. Almost everyone I talk to agrees that the cafeteria should be more flexible when it comes to meal plans. I mean, I'm not crazy about the cafeteria's food, but I like to go there to meet up with friends and hang out. I'd buy a 50 meal plan, for example, but I would never get the yearly meal plan.
Yeah, I guess you have a point, but won't this make meals more expensive? I'm on the school's meal plan right now, and the one thing I love about it is the price. It's so cheap.
I don't see why a new meal plan structure would affect the price of the current system. It's basically just adding more options. Even though I might have to pay more per meal for my plan, it fits my schedule better. This type of structure is going to make everyone happy, both the students who don't plan on eating at the cafeteria every day, and the school, which can make a bit more money from the variety of options. And even students like you who already are on the meal plan won't be affected by this change.
I guess you're right. Maybe Johnny will get what he wants after all.
Now, answer the question. The man expresses his opinion on cafeteria meal plans. State his opinion and explain the reason he gives for holding that opinion. You have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Directions. You will now read a short passage and then listen to a lecture on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about the passage. After you hear the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. You have 45 seconds to read the passage below. You may begin reading now. Now listen to a lecture about this topic in a behavioral psychology class.
Okay, so you may have never heard of the terms instrumental and expressive before when it comes to leadership, but I bet you could think of a couple people who fit these descriptions. Now, I used to have a part-time job working as a waitress at a restaurant. I had a boss named Bill who was a typical instrumental leader. Not only was he good at managing his business, but he also had extensive experience as a waiter. He had high standards in the way we treated customers, and he expected all of us to do the same. The waiters were almost completely forbidden to speak with one another while at work, even when we didn't have any customers. He felt that if we focused on our tasks and the customers, not on each other, we wouldn't get distracted or become lazy. He did have a successful restaurant, but there were certainly other approaches he could have taken that weren't so strict. You know, my boss right now is Professor Green, the head of the department. She really knows how to treat the university staff with respect. While there are rules we have to follow and deadlines we must meet, she hardly ever pressures us. She treats us like adults, and we, the teaching staff, all do our jobs to the best of our abilities because we don't want to disappoint or upset her. She holds weekly staff meetings so we can communicate about problems in class and even holds parties at her home once a month. We all feel like a part of an open and honest team, and that would not be possible without her expressive type of leadership.
Now, answer the question. Using the examples from the lecture, describe 2 types of leadership. You have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Directions. You will now listen to part of a lecture. You will then be asked a question about it. After you hear the question, you will have 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
We spend approximately 1/3 of our lives sleeping. Given that the average life expectancy for most of us falls between 73 and 79 years old, we can expect to spend approximately 25 years of our lives sleeping. Surprisingly, the reason why we humans sleep is still mostly a mystery, but there are a few theories that attempt to explain the function of sleep. One popular hypothesis argues that sleep is essential in order for us humans to restore the resources we use throughout the day. The same way that bears hibernate in the winter when resources are scarce, perhaps people sleep at night to reduce the amount of energy they use. It has recently become fashionable to argue that people need to sleep at least 8 hours in a night in order to function at their optimal physical and mental capacity. I'm sure all of you have felt pretty sluggish after a late night with just a few hours of sleep, so this theory makes sense intuitively. However, there are others who are not convinced by this simplistic explanation of why we sleep and have proposed other explanations. Another popular theory proposes that sleep is an adaptive response to predatory risk. In other words, our great ancestors were more likely to be hunted and killed at night by other animals, so a desire to sleep in a safe, comfortable area was an evolutionary mechanism that helped shield us from harm. As I'm sure you are all aware, there are more risks at nighttime since visibility is so low. We haven't adapted our senses in the same way other creatures have to survive throughout the night. Accordingly, it makes sense to believe that sleep is a biological response to our environmental conditions. But, just like the theory involving energy conservation, there are some who disagree.
Now, answer the question. Using points and examples from the talk, describe the two theories that explain why humans sleep. You have 20 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You can begin speaking now.
As a matter of fact, I do agree that teenagers should work in order to learn more about personal responsibility. For example, when I was in high school, I worked as a custodian at another school in our district. In the summer, I worked from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. 5 days a week with a bunch of blue-collar, middle-aged men who had worked hard their entire lives. Not only did I have to lift heavy objects and work with complicated machinery, but I also spent time with rugged men who encouraged me to focus on my studies and get a college degree. That's why I think working as a student is a great way to learn about the value of both hard work and a good education.
According to the letter, the school's meal plan is too strict and should be more flexible. The man in the conversation completely agrees with this proposal. Even though he's not a big fan of the cafeteria's food, he likes to go there to hang out sometimes. He's not on the school meal plan right now, but if they had a flexible 50 meal plan, for example, he would take advantage of it. On top of that, he believes adding this option will satisfy everyone. Students can still go to the cafeteria once in a while for the occasional meal, and the school can earn a bit more revenue with the increase in school lunch purchases. The prices wouldn't change, only the number of options. This basically sums up why the man likes the idea of changing the school's meal plan.
This is a fascinating topic. According to the author, there are two main types of leaders: instrumental and expressive. The lecture provides two excellent and personal examples of each type to further illustrate this idea. First, she talks about her old boss, Bill, who is a typical instrumental leader. Bill was very professional and kept the staff focused on their work and customers, of course. Some employees didn't like Bill because they thought he was too strict, though. In contrast, the lecturer now works under Professor Green, and she's an expressive type of leader.
She's respectful of the staff and holds weekly meetings for them to communicate about their problems. The professor seems to prefer expressive leadership because everyone feels more like a part of the team. So, there you have it. Those are the two types of leadership discussed in the passages.
So, the professor is talking about sleep, and more specifically, he's describing two main theories about why we sleep. One idea is that we need sleep in order to restore the resources we use throughout the day. Similar to a hibernating bear, people need sleep to restore their energy. The common thought is that 8 hours is needed for people to function at their best. But there is another theory that says people sleep because of evolution. Our eyes were never adapted to being active at night. So, the idea is that long ago, finding a safe place for shelter at nighttime was a way to avoid predators and stay alive. After continuing this practice, over time, sleeping became something of a biological response to our environment. These are the two theories the professor uses to explain why humans sleep.
All right, you have made it to the end. Congratulations. This TOEFL stuff is difficult, but you made it. You devoted over an hour of your time to getting better, to improving your score. Be proud of yourself. Subscribe if you thought that this was helpful. I'd really appreciate it. Don't forget to visit tsdprep.com for more TOEFL speaking practice. But that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.